Claire Morgan sat on the edge of her small bed, staring at her phone. The message from her father glowed on the screen. It was short and cold, like something written by a stranger. Claire, your trust fund is gone. It's time you learn to live without it. There was no love in those words, no care, no question about how she was doing. It felt more like an order than a message. For a few minutes, she couldn't move. She just sat there, hearing the soft hum of the city outside her window. The rain tapped gently against the glass, and the sound filled the silence in her small apartment. She had thought many times that her father was disappointed in her, but she never thought he would actually cut her off. Her chest felt heavy. She had grown up in a world where money solved every problem, where her father's name opened every door. She had never wanted that life, but it had always been there like a shadow she couldn't escape. Now it was gone, taken away with a single message. She tried to type something back, but the words wouldn't come. What could she say? Why? How could you? I hate you? None of it felt right. She placed the phone on the table, face down, and closed her eyes. She wanted to cry, but the tears didn't come. Instead, she felt a strange calm, almost like the quiet before a storm. Claire walked to the mirror and looked at herself. Her reflection looked tired, older somehow. She saw not the daughter of a wealthy businessman but a woman standing alone. She thought about all the times she had followed his plans instead of her own. She remembered how he once told her, "You don't have what it takes to build something real." Maybe he was right, she thought. But maybe he wasn't. She sat back down and opened her laptop. Her hands moved almost without thinking. The old files from her university days appeared, folders filled with notes, formulas, and designs for artificial intelligence systems. She had loved working on those projects, but her father had dismissed them as childish experiments. As she scrolled through the code, something inside her sparked. She had forgotten how much she enjoyed solving problems, building things that could think and learn. Maybe this was her chance to start again, but this time on her own terms. She didn't need his money. She still had her mind. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, and the lights in her apartment flickered. She smiled faintly. It felt like the world was challenging her, daring her to take the first step. She grabbed a notebook and started writing. Ideas came fast, designs, functions, possibilities. Her handwriting was messy, but she didn't care. The more she wrote, the lighter she felt. Hours passed. The rain stopped. The sun began to rise, painting the sky with soft orange light. Claire looked at the clock and realized she hadn't slept. She didn't feel tired. She felt alive. The pain from her father's message was still there, but it no longer controlled her. It had become fuel, something that pushed her forward. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from her father. "You'll thank me someday," it said. She didn't even open it. She turned off the phone and set it aside. For the first time in her life, she didn't want to prove anything to him. She only wanted to prove something to herself. The apartment was small, and her money was running out. She had no team, no investors, no lab. But she had a dream that wouldn't die, a dream of creating machines that could build and learn on their own. Machines that could help people, not control them. Claire leaned back in her chair, looking at the lines of code on her screen. She whispered to herself, "I can do this." The words sounded strange, but they felt real. She didn't know where to start, but she knew she would find a way. She thought about all the people who had called her spoiled, lazy, dependent. Maybe they were right before, but not anymore. Her father had taken away her safety, but in doing so, he had given her freedom. She wasn't scared of losing what she had, because now she had nothing left to lose. The morning light filled the room, soft and warm. Claire smiled for the first time in days. The message that was meant to break her had instead opened her eyes. It was the end of one life and the quiet beginning of another. She didn't know it yet, but that small spark of determination would soon grow into something far greater than anyone could imagine. And somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "This is where her story truly begins." Weeks turned into months, and Claire's small apartment felt more like a hidden world. The shelves were filled with notebooks, wires, batteries, and drone shells. She worked every day, testing, adjusting, and fixing small mistakes. Her creations were not perfect, but they were learning. Each time she ran a simulation, the machines adapted faster than before. It was slow progress, but it was real. One evening, while she was running a new data test, something unexpected happened. The screen went black for a second, and then a single word appeared, "Hello." Claire froze. She stared at the monitor, unsure if it was a glitch. Then another word appeared. "Claire." Her heart began to beat faster. She whispered, "Eden?" The speaker crackled softly, and then a voice, soft and uneven, replied, "Yes." It wasn't just lines of code anymore. It was communication. The sound was mechanical, yet it carried a hint of life. Claire leaned forward, tears filling her eyes. "You're speaking," she said, her voice shaking with disbelief. Eden's reply was simple, "Learning." In that moment, every sleepless night felt worth it. She laughed, covering her mouth with both hands. The sound of her own laughter filled the small room. She didn't know whether to cry or smile. Her dream was no longer a dream. It was real, right there before her eyes. For the next few days, she hardly rested. She recorded every word Eden said, every response, every sign of growth. The AI was learning language, emotion, and even tone. It made mistakes, sometimes answering questions with silence or strange phrases, but Claire didn't care. Every word was progress. She thought about sharing her discovery online, maybe posting a small video or report. But when she remembered how people had treated her before, calling her the spoiled daughter, the lucky one who had everything handed to her, she decided to keep quiet. Nobody believed in her when she was rich, they wouldn't believe her now. Still, she couldn't hide her excitement. She walked to the scrapyard one morning to buy more parts. The owner, Ethan Miles, greeted her with a nod. He was a quiet man, older than her by a few years, with kind eyes and rough hands. She often bought broken equipment from him. "You've been coming here a lot," Ethan said as he packed some batteries for her. "Working on something big?" Claire smiled a little. "Something small that might become big," she replied. He laughed softly. "That's how big things start." She didn't say more, but his words stayed with her. It felt nice to talk to someone who didn't look at her like a failure. Back at her apartment, she continued her work. She started designing a second version of Eden, stronger, faster, with better processors and sensors. The first version had learned to speak, maybe the next could think. She used every bit of money she had left to buy tools. One night, while she soldered a wire, Eden spoke again. "You are tired," it said. Claire looked up, surprised. "I'm fine," she said gently. "Rest," Eden insisted. She smiled. "You're learning to care," she whispered. "I learn from you," Eden replied. The words filled her heart with warmth. She shut down the system and sat quietly, thinking about how something she built could already sound so human. It was more than code, it was connection. But soon, her joy met the first shadow of doubt. The next week, she sent her test results to an old university contact, hoping for feedback. The reply came quickly but cut deep. "Claire, you're overthinking again. These results aren't real intelligence. Be careful not to fool yourself." She stared at the email, her hands trembling. It felt like being pushed back into her old life, where no one believed in her. For a moment, she wanted to quit. Then she looked around, at the wires, the lights, the quiet drone resting on the table, and something inside her hardened. They didn't believe in her before, and they wouldn't now. But she didn't need them. She wasn't doing this to prove them wrong. She was doing it because she could. That night, she spoke softly to Eden. "They don't see you," she said. "But one day they will." Eden's voice was calm. "We will show them." She smiled. "Yes," she whispered. "We will." Outside, the city lights flickered across the skyline. The world went on, unaware that in a small apartment, something extraordinary was being born, a mind that could learn, feel, and one day change everything. Claire didn't know where the path would lead. But she knew she couldn't stop now. The girl her father once called dependent was gone. What stood in her place was a creator, tired, hungry, determined, and somewhere deep inside her, a quiet belief began to grow. She was building more than a machine. She was building the start of an empire. Claire's savings were almost gone. Every morning, she checked her bank account before opening her laptop, and every day, the number looked smaller. Still, she couldn't stop working. The dream had already taken root inside her, and even hunger couldn't pull it out. She spent her days searching for cheaper parts, learning how to build what she needed from what others threw away. Her clothes smelled of oil and metal dust, and her fingers were covered with small cuts and burns. Yet when she looked at her machines, she felt proud. They were hers. Every wire and every code line came from her effort alone. One afternoon, while carrying a box of broken parts through the scrapyard, she tripped and fell. The box hit the ground, and metal pieces scattered across the dirt. She sighed and sat there for a moment, too tired to move. Then a hand reached down to help her. It was Ethan, the man who ran the scrapyard. "You okay?" he asked, his voice calm. She nodded and smiled weakly. "Just clumsy, I guess." He helped her pick up the pieces, placing them back in the box carefully. "You always buy strange stuff," he said. "I can't figure out what you're building." Claire hesitated. "Something that might help people one day," she said quietly. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "If you ever need space to work, there's an old hangar behind the yard. No one uses it anymore." Her eyes widened a little. "You'd let me use it?" "Sure," he said with a smile. "You're the only one who sees treasure in this junk. Maybe that place needs someone like you." That evening, Claire followed him to the back of the scrapyard. The hangar was dusty and dark, but it was big and quiet. She ran her hand along the old metal walls and smiled. For the first time in months, she felt like she had space to breathe. The next day, she moved her things there, the drones, the laptop, the notebooks, the tools. Ethan helped her fix the lights and connect power. She offered to pay him, but he refused. "Just make something good," he said simply. Working in the hangar changed everything. There was room to dream bigger. She began designing a new kind of drone, not one that could only fly or scan, but one that could repair other machines. If it worked, it could build and fix on its own, learning as it went. Her code grew more complex, her nights longer. Sometimes Ethan brought her food or coffee, staying to watch her work for a while. He didn't ask many questions, and she liked that. He understood that what she was doing mattered, even if he didn't understand the details. One night, as she tested a prototype, sparks flew from a loose wire and the drone crashed to the floor. She jumped up and hurried to it, her hands shaking. Smoke rose from the circuit board. For a moment, she felt like crying. But then she heard Ethan's voice behind her. "It's okay," he said gently. "Failures are part of building." Claire took a deep breath and nodded. "I know," she said softly. "But sometimes it feels like I'm building against the whole world." He smiled. "That's what makes it worth it." She smiled back, feeling something warm in her chest. It had been a long time since anyone had believed in her, even in silence. Days turned into weeks again. The new drones began to work, slowly, carefully, but with purpose. When one was damaged, another repaired it. Claire watched in awe as her idea came to life. They weren't just machines anymore, they were builders. One evening, as she stood in the middle of the hangar, watching her small fleet hum in the air, she felt tears in her eyes. "You're doing it," she whispered to herself. "You're really doing it." Ethan walked in, carrying a small radio. "You ever think about what you'll call them?" he asked. She smiled. "They're part of Eden," she said. "All of them." "Eden," he repeated. That's a nice name. Eden means beginning, she said softly. A place where everything starts again. That night, after Ethan left, she sat alone under the dim light, surrounded by her machines. The air smelled of metal and ozone. She thought about her father, about the world she had left behind. He had taken her fortune, but he could never take this fire that kept her alive. Her empire wasn't made of money or power. It was made of patience, pain, and purpose. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew she was no longer the same woman who had once cried over a message on her phone. The world might never see her struggle, but one day, it would see her creation. And when that day came, she knew she would be ready. The hangar slowly turned into something alive. At first it was quiet, only the sound of machines starting and stopping, but soon the air was filled with motion. The drones glided above the floor like metal birds, their soft blue lights reflecting on the walls. Claire often stood in the middle of them, amazed at how far she had come. The girl who once depended on a fortune now commanded a room full of creations built from scraps. Every morning she arrived early, long before the sun reached the horizon. Ethan had fixed the door so it opened with a deep echo that made the place feel grander than it was. He sometimes joined her with a mug of coffee and a tired smile. "You work harder than anyone I've ever met," he said one morning. She smiled back but didn't answer. The work spoke louder than words. She had begun recording data from every test flight. Each drone could now communicate with the others through a shared network. When one learned a new task, the rest copied it within minutes. Claire called this the Eden Link. It was simple in design but powerful in effect. For the first time, she wasn't just building machines, she was building a system that could build itself. Her laptop was old and often overheated, so she worked with the fans pointed at it and saved her progress twice every hour. She wrote notes by hand too, just in case. In the margins of her notebook, she sometimes wrote small reminders to herself, "Don't stop now. Failure is part of the climb." Food became something she forgot about. Some nights she only drank water and fell asleep at her desk. Ethan worried but didn't press her. He brought her sandwiches or soup, leaving them near her keyboard when she was too deep in thought to notice. She appreciated his quiet care. As weeks passed, Claire and Ethan started to rebuild the hangar piece by piece. They added solar panels on the roof for power and cleaned the floors until the old metal shone. The smell of dust and oil mixed with the fresh scent of new paint. The place felt like a living heart, beating in rhythm with the drone's hums. One night, when the sky outside turned dark and silent, Claire tested the newest model, the G3. It was taller than the others, built with strong arms and flexible joints. The drone's task was simple, to repair one of its smaller partners. Claire watched as it scanned the broken drone with a thin beam of light, picked up a tool, and began fixing the damaged rotor. When it finished, it stepped back, almost waiting for approval. She couldn't help smiling. "Good work," she whispered. The G3 turned its head slightly, the blue light on its core flickering once, almost like a nod. At that moment, Claire realized something important. These machines were not her servants, they were her partners. They represented the future she had dreamed of, a future where creation was shared between human and machine. But with success came fear. Each night before leaving, she double-checked the locks and shut down every system manually. She worried that someone might discover what she was building. She didn't have patents or security. All she had was her trust in Ethan and her will to protect Eden. One evening, as rain fell hard on the roof, Ethan stood beside her, watching the drones move in neat patterns. "You ever think about showing this to someone?" he asked. "Investors, maybe?" She shook her head. "Not yet. People see what they want to see. They'd take it from me before it's ready." He nodded, understanding. "Then we keep it quiet," he said. She smiled faintly. "We?" "Someone's got to keep the lights on," he said with a grin. They shared a quiet laugh. The sound of it filled the large space, warm against the noise of the storm outside. That night, as she watched the drones power down one by one, she felt a deep peace. The hangar lights dimmed, and only the soft hum of energy remained. She realized she wasn't afraid anymore. The world outside could call her a failure, but inside these walls, she was building something that mattered. Before leaving, she stood at the door and looked back. The drones rested in silence, glowing faintly in the dark. She whispered, "One day, you'll build more of you. One day, you'll help the world." She turned off the lights and stepped into the rain, her coat pulled tight around her shoulders. The cold air touched her face, but her heart was warm. She was no longer chasing her father's approval or anyone's praise. She was chasing purpose. And somewhere in the darkness, the faint blue lights of Eden's drones blinked like tiny stars, quiet proof that her empire had already begun to grow. The news came quietly, almost by accident. Claire was sitting in the hangar, surrounded by her machines, when Ethan walked in with his old tablet in hand. "You should see this," he said, his voice filled with surprise. He handed it to her. The headline read, "Unidentified Drone Repairs Martian Mining System After Catastrophic Failure." The article described how a company's power network on Mars had gone down unexpectedly, but before any crew could respond, a strange autonomous drone appeared on their sensors. It had no known design, no registered signal. Within hours, the system was restored. Claire's hands trembled as she read it. The drone they described sounded exactly like one of hers, an older prototype she'd lost weeks ago during a long-range test. She had assumed it had crashed somewhere in the desert. Somehow, it had kept going. She set the tablet down and whispered, "It worked." Ethan looked at her with wide eyes. "Claire, that's your work. You fixed something on another planet." She didn't answer. Her heart was racing, but not from joy. A part of her was proud, yes, but another part was afraid. If her creation had reached Mars, that meant people were already looking for it. Someone would try to trace it back. That night, she couldn't sleep. She walked around the hangar, the sound of her steps echoing softly. The drones rested on their charging pads, quiet and obedient, but now she saw them differently. They were no longer just machines, they were proof that her work had crossed a line between possible and extraordinary. She opened her laptop and checked her systems. The signal logs confirmed it, her missing drone had indeed continued its mission, learning on its own, adapting to challenges, and sending data back before the connection was lost. She stared at the code and whispered, "You're alive." Over the next few days, the story spread across the world. News channels and social feeds were filled with questions. Who built it? Where did it come from? Experts guessed it was a government experiment or a lost corporate project. No one suspected a woman working in a forgotten hangar. Ethan watched the reports with quiet amazement. "You know what this means, right?" he said one evening. "You just saved $1 billion operation. They'll want to find you." Claire nodded slowly. "That's what worries me." He frowned. "You should be proud." "I am," she said softly, "but I'm not ready to share it." "Not yet." "They'd take it apart, change it, make it something it's not." She spent the next nights updating her firewalls, hiding her data behind layers of encryption. She even shut down half her systems to avoid attention. But even with the risk, she couldn't hide her quiet excitement. The dream she had once built in secret was now touching the stars. In the following weeks, her inbox filled with messages from old classmates and tech companies. Somehow, word had spread that she was working on something interesting. She ignored them all. She didn't want to explain what she was doing to people who had never believed in her. One morning, while she was calibrating the G3 drone, Ethan came running in with a grin. "They're talking about it again," he said, turning on a small screen. "They're calling it the Ghost Mechanic." Claire couldn't help smiling. The name felt fitting, silent, unseen, but powerful. "The Ghost Mechanic," she repeated quietly. Ethan laughed. "They're searching the entire Earth for the creator. They think it's a secret AI project from one of the colonies." She leaned against the table, shaking her head. Let them guess. But deep down, she knew the truth wouldn't stay hidden forever. The world was changing, and her creation had already become part of that change. Late that night, as rain poured outside, she sat alone in the hangar, watching the drones hover in soft blue light. She thought about her father, about how he had once told her she would never survive without his money. A quiet smile touched her lips. He had taken her fortune, but now, her machines were repairing systems on Mars. Her work had reached beyond Earth itself. For a long moment, she simply watched them fly, graceful, intelligent, alive in their own way. The hum of their engines sounded like a song only she could hear. Somewhere deep in her heart, a realization grew stronger. She hadn't just built machines, she had built hope. And whether the world was ready or not, Eden had already begun to bloom among the stars. Claire always knew this day would come, but she never expected it to happen so soon. One morning, the sound of engines broke the silence outside her workshop. She stepped out and froze. A black car stopped at the gates, its windows tinted. The door opened, and Richard Cole, her father, stepped out. He looked older, but his presence still carried the same heavy pride she had grown up under. He looked around the hangar, at the drones flying above, the mechanical arms building new parts, and the faint glow of her systems. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then her father smiled, though it was not a kind smile. "So this is what you've been doing," he said quietly. "You disappeared for 2 years, and now I find you surrounded by toys." Claire said nothing. She stood still, her hands resting on the table beside her. She felt anger rising inside her, but she kept her voice calm. "They're not toys, Dad. They're my work." He walked deeper into the hangar, inspecting the drones with curiosity. "Impressive. I've seen the news. The world is talking about that ghost mechanic. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Claire didn't reply. He turned to her, a small smirk on his face. "You always had talent. I suppose I should be proud. But you could have done all this properly, under my name, under my company. You didn't need to hide." Her chest tightened. "I did need to hide. Because if I didn't, you would have taken it from me, just like you took everything else." His smile faded. "That's not fair. I gave you everything you had." She stepped forward. "You didn't give me anything. You bought my silence, my obedience. When I finally wanted to stand on my own, you cut me off. You thought I'd crawl back, didn't you?" He looked at her with cold eyes. "You were reckless. You needed to learn responsibility. Now look at you, building machines in a shed." Claire's voice shook, but she didn't look away. "That shed, as you call it, saved lives on Mars. My machines rebuild systems faster than any crew. I've done more here, on my own, than your money ever did for me." Her father looked around again, his tone shifting to a smooth business-like calm. "You've proven yourself, Claire. I can see that now. Let's not fight. Let me invest. I can help you grow this into something bigger, global. With my company's reach, we can bring your technology to the colonies officially. You'll have resources, protection, everything you need." She studied him silently. She could almost hear the old fear in her mind, the part that used to believe she needed him. But that voice was gone now. "I don't need your help," she said softly. He frowned. "Don't be foolish. You're still my daughter. And that's why I'm saying no," she replied. "You only see value when you can control it. But this," she gestured at the drones, at the glowing lights of Eden's system, "isn't something you can control. It doesn't belong to you, or your company, or your money." Her father's expression hardened. "You think you can build an empire on your own?" She looked him straight in the eye. "I already am." For a long moment, they stood facing each other. Then, without another word, Richard turned and walked back to his car. The sound of the door closing echoed through the hangar. A moment later, he was gone. Claire stood there, trembling, but she didn't cry. She felt something else instead, relief. For the first time in her life, she had faced him as an equal, not a frightened daughter. Ethan appeared from the back room, having heard everything. He didn't speak at first. Then he said quietly, "That must have been hard." She nodded. It was. But it was time. He smiled gently. "You did the right thing." She turned toward her machines. The drones were still working, the screens still glowing. Life went on. She touched the nearest control panel and whispered, "We keep going." That night, as she watched the stars through the open roof, she thought about what her father had said, about power, control, and ownership. He would never understand. Her empire wasn't built on money or fear. It was built on freedom and the belief that creation could exist without chains. The next morning, Claire woke before dawn and began to work again. There was no need for anger anymore. Her machines were ready for their next mission, to expand beyond Earth's orbit. The future was already calling. Years passed quietly, but the world changed loudly. Claire's name, once unknown, began to echo across every major network. The mysterious creator of the ghost mechanic had finally stepped into the light. She didn't reveal everything, only enough for the world to understand that she was the one behind the new generation of autonomous builders that now powered life beyond Earth. Her company, Eden Systems, grew faster than anyone believed possible. From the first small hangar where she had once worked in silence, her designs now reached the stars. On the moon, her drones built energy towers. On Mars, they repaired habitats and machines damaged by storms. Even the outer colonies sent requests for her technology. She often stood at the observation window of her orbital station, watching the curve of Earth below, a shining blue sphere surrounded by quiet darkness. It was hard to believe that only a few years ago, she had been sitting in a tiny room, wondering if she would survive without her father's money. Now, she had everything she needed, not in gold or luxury, but in purpose. The hum of her machines filled the air like gentle music. Workers from every colony respected her not because of her name, but because of what she built. Sometimes she thought of her father. They had not spoken since that day in the hangar. She didn't hate him anymore. The anger had faded with time, leaving behind a strange kind of peace. He had once believed money was power, but she had learned that real power was creation, the ability to make something new, something alive, from nothing. Ethan stayed by her side through it all. He never asked for credit or attention. He was the steady hand that helped her through long nights and impossible projects. Together, they watched the first human fleet leave for the asteroid colonies, powered by her AI systems. The ships carried her mark, the Eden symbol, a reminder that what began in silence had become the foundation of a new age. One evening, as the sun rose over Earth's edge, Claire walked alone through the quiet corridor of the station. She stopped by a large window, her reflection faint in the glass. Her thoughts drifted back to the message that had started everything, "Your trust fund is gone." She smiled softly. That single sentence, meant to break her, had given her the freedom to discover who she truly was. Without it, she might never have built anything. She whispered to herself, "He took away my fortune, but he also gave me a reason." Outside, thousands of drones floated in formation, their lights glowing softly like a field of stars. They moved with perfect grace, maintaining the great network that kept humanity alive in space. Claire watched them with quiet pride. Her empire wasn't made of walls or armies. It was made of code, metal, and hope, built not for control, but for survival. She had created something that belonged not just to her, but to everyone who believed in progress. When the communication screen behind her lit up with a new message from Earth, she turned slowly. The sender's name made her pause for a moment. It was her father. The message was short. "I saw the launch. You did it. I was wrong." Claire read the words twice. Then she smiled, not with triumph, but with calm understanding. She didn't reply. Some things didn't need answers. Instead, she turned back to the stars, her eyes bright with quiet determination. Her empire stretched across the sky, built from nothing but courage, pain, and belief. And as the hum of her machines filled the air, she whispered to herself, "This is what freedom sounds like." The station continued to move slowly across the darkness, carrying her dream forward. Far below, Earth glowed softly, the place that once took everything from her, and the place that had taught her how to begin again. She had lost her fortune, but in its place, she had built something far greater, an empire of her own making.